Kevin, you don't need to be afraid of monsters.
Wait, really?
No, monsters can't use Shardblades to cut through the walls of your house and attack you without a sound in the middle of the night, shearing through any form of protection you try to manifest. Be afraid of Shardbearers.
Sule! El, ruler with no title, is a terrifying manifestation of Odium's fury. We know very little about El's backstory, but what we do know leaves more questions than answers. This creature is powerful and capable. But before we go too far here, we have a major spoiler warning for the entire Stormlight Archive. We will be spoiling the end of Wind and Truth, so stop here if you aren't caught up. Also, like this video and hit the subscribe button if you don't want to find Moash under your bed tonight. A simple 5 sentences from Wind and Truth open the door to an unnerving question. What if El is a Radiant? Let me set the stage for you. In chapter 137 of Wind and Truth, Venli and the listeners revealed their betrayal to El and his forces. Up until this point, the listeners had feigned an alliance with Odium. As the Radiants retreated, El, the leader of Odium's army on the Shattered Plains, had assumed victory. As the contest of champions began, the clouds of the Everstorm retreated from Narak. This was when Venli removed a protected piece of paper from her pocket. A contract from Queen Yasna, finally ending the years-long war between the listeners and humans, and giving the Shattered Plains back to Venli's people. Since day 10 had arrived and the contest had already started, the boundaries of the nations were now set in stone. Odium and his armies were no longer allowed in the Shattered Plains. El's retinue was furious at the betrayal, and this is where our passage starts. See if you can spot it.
"This is stupidity," one of El's companions, a magnified one, shouted to Fury. "We will just take it from these little ones." He drew back his hand to swing at Venli, and while Leshwi and the others tried to intervene, it was El who moved first, forming a long, thin sword from the air and stabbing it through the side of the fused's head. The eyes burned. That was a Shardblade.
Okay, yeah, El has a Shardblade. So what? At this point in the story, Shardbearers are a little less rare than they were in the Way of Kings. Radiants were now forming new blades rapidly, and many shards fell to Odium's forces through the battle so far. El is now Odium's little ruler with no titles, so he obviously could take a Shardblade if he wanted one. But that's not the important thing here. It's this. It was El who moved first, forming a long, thin sword from the air. Now, what's the basic rule of Shardblades? Specifically Deadeye Blades? 10 heartbeats. Adolin, Dalinar, Elokar, Sadeas, Amaram, Eshonai. All of them had to wait 10 heartbeats to form their blades. Now yes, faster and slower heart rate would affect this, singers have different anatomy, yada yada yada, but let's think about the context here. After the big reveal, everyone was shocked. The magnified one was the first to move. He shouted, moving into attack, and with no hesitation at all, El took him down. That couldn't have taken more than 10 seconds. Heck, that couldn't have taken more than 5 seconds. Yet El had his blade immediately ready to attack the fuse. Now this could be a fantastic sense of situational awareness, but what if it's something else? You know what Shardblades don't require 10 heartbeats? I think El is a Radiant, or at least something like one. I think this section is a good bit of proof towards that fact, but there may be more hiding under the surface. El is a fused, and a rather notable one at that. He is very respected by Odium, but he's also been stripped of his titles and rhythms for his perverse interest in humankind. Now, we haven't seen another fuse take on a Radiant friend before, right? In chapter 109 of Rhythm of War, Leshwi falls on her knees before Venli. Venli was terrified of how Leshwi would respond to her Radiant bond, but instead of lashing out in anger, the fuse says this: "Sorry, Venli, they've come back to us. They've forgiven us." This is an unexpected response to be sure, but the next sentence is even more shocking. "Please," Leshwi said to Longing, "ask your Spren. Do they know an honor Spren named Rhea? She was my friend once, precious to me." Now, I could overreact to this passage, so I will. Was Leshwi once a Windrunner? More seriously now, even if Leshwi wasn't bonded to Rhea, her being a friend to an honor Spren opens a door here. Leshwi correctly calls out that the Spren are returning to the listeners, and Venli even shares that Tamber has friends who are willing to try with their kind again. So obviously some Spren are warming up to the listeners and the singers, and it's heavily suggested that there's some level of bond between the fused and the honor Spren in the past. Now that would be crazy. Speaking of crazy bonds, I would be remiss if I talked about strange Spren without mentioning Glisten Toomey. If you aren't aware of Ja-Anat's tampering with Spren, we have an awesome video on all 9 of the Unmade that explains it best, linked here. To summarize, Ja-Anat, one of the 9 splinters of Odium called the Unmade, has a propensity to meddle with the Spren of Roshar and improve them. One such example of this is Gliss, Renarin's Mist Spren. Gliss gives Renarin the abilities of a Truth Watcher and also access to Odium's fortune. Ja-Anat also sent Toomey to R'lain, showing that she wants to help both human and singer. Could Ja-Anat have done the same for El? Ja-Anat's bonds don't work the same way Radiant bonds do, so this could be a loophole to allow El this kind of bond without it serving honor. The wildest part of all of this comes down to Retribution. Before Terravonium took on honor and became Retribution, El attempted to gain his attention by killing the remnant of Yezrian's soul with Anti-Light. This was a bold strategy, as Odium kept the trophy of the Herald intentionally locked away in a guarded aluminum vault. El took this opportunity to say goodbye to his old friend, showing us actual feelings for maybe the first time, and towards a Herald of Honor at that. This is the same creature who used Voidlight to permakill his ally Lezian. For science? El is very fond of humankind, and he wishes to rule over the humans of Roshar upon Odium's victory. We see him fight and kill as he's meant to, but he's just as quick to kill his own for stepping out of line. Could all of this fondness for humans be what led him to wanting a Radiant Bond? We still know so little about his history or his real motivations, so what do you think El is fighting for? Now, you may have already started screaming at us in the comments, what about the Honor Blades? Now, we know at this point that Kaladin and Szeth have 7 of the 10 Honor Blades in Shinovar. Nail and Ishar are there as well and have their own, and Yezrian's blade is in Moash's possession. The only possible blade for El to have is Yezrian's. That Honor Blade is described as thin, and all Shard Blades are longer than normal swords, so the description in chapter 137 would technically fit. Seeing that Moash was with El's forces on Narak, it's not impossible for this to be true. El did have a great fondness for Yezrian before honor killing him. However, we haven't seen El use any of the Windrunner surges, and I'm not sure there's good enough reason for him to take it at this point if he hadn't already taken it before. Also, our theory's cooler, so... Now, this theory isn't as concrete as some of our other videos, but there's a lot to think about with this one. What would it say for El's character if he's hiding a Radiant Bond from Retribution? Now, we think the metal El swaps his carapace out for is aluminum when he's reborn. Wouldn't that be the perfect place to hide a little enlightened Spren? But what do you think? Is El a Radiant? Does he have a lightning-fast heartbeat? Did Ja not enlighten a Spren for him? We won't be getting answers on this soon, but if you liked today's video, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next big Cosmere theories. Kolo?